Well, here we are with another week. We're actually getting pretty close to the end of the semester now. This is for the week of the 20th, um, April 20th, for 2020. Our topic for this week is the West. What I wanted to do first is there should be a linked video from Ken Burns' series, The West, called Empire on the Trails. Make sure you watch that video first. And then what this video is just kind of the lecture that will accompany it. The next week, we will get into the lead up to the Civil War and the Civil War itself, finishing with the following week, which is our last week of class, depending on when you watch this. We'll talk some about Reconstruction, and mainly that'll be kind of your week to get everything done and turned in. Hopefully, you saw the announcement. We're changing the way we're doing the document analysis. Instead of me giving you some documents, I want you to find a document of at least 5 pages from any of the time periods in American history we have talked about, and then in about 2 pages, at least 2 pages, critique the document. What does the document say? What does it say about the time period in which it is from? Uh, we're going to try it that way. Hopefully, that'll kind of work out. So, anyway, let's talk about the West. Now, the video does a really good job of talking about Mormons and the founding of the Texas Republic and the Alamo and all that kind of stuff. So, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of fill in some of those gaps and add some information to that. So, American fur traders will eventually take over the fur industry. Remember, at first that was Native Americans and the French. So now, by this time period, the 1820s, 1840s, it is Americans who do mostly of the fur trade. They are going to be called mounted men. They talk about the mountain man Joe Meek. By the way, I'm interested to see what you think of old Joe Meek, whether he's a good guy or a jerk. They were the mountain men. From 1822 to 1843, the 3,000 white trappers entered into the region. Each year, they would hold a rendezvous at the Rocky Mountains. This is where Indians and mountain men exchanged pelts for goods. It became an almost carnival-like atmosphere. Basically, if you didn't show up at the rendezvous, then people just assumed you were dead. The fur trade will make some men like John Jacob Astor rich. In fact, John Jacob Astor will become the first multimillionaire in our country's history. By 1848, he will amass a fortune of $20 million, back when that was saying something. What will happen is we will kill off a large part of the otter and beaver population. By 1840, there's a change in fashion. Most preferred silk over fur, and this will basically bring a fur trade to an end. So we're changing from American look with the coonskin cap to the silk from the Asia. But the mountain men will also be a source of information, which will help create an interest in the West. There had been some expeditions to the West, including John C. Fremont, Lieutenant John C. Fremont, who had explored California. Fun fact about Fremont, he is going to be the first ever Republican nominee for president. Fremont published a public account where he gave information about the water around, terrain, routes where you could get your water, different trails, things like that. This will lead to the concept of manifest destiny, a term first used in 1845 by John O'Sullivan. Basically, the idea was that manifest destiny it's America fulfilling the white man's burden. It was our duty. It was God wanted us to expand all the way to the Pacific coast. Senator Thomas Hart Benton said that this would be the triumph of Christianity over savagery. Um, there was a lot of interest during this time in the Oregon Territory. Remember, uh, the United States and the British were jointly occupying it. They needed the Americans to actually fill the place up. 1843 will kick off the Great Migration, where people will go across a 2,000-mile trail, overland trail known as the Oregon Trail. I'm sure you have played the game. I always died of dysentery. I never could get to Oregon. By 1845, at least 5,000 settlers had made the 5 or 6 month journey. Women tended to be the ones who ended up doing most of the work. You kind of saw that in the video, I'm sure. Um, Women often had to repair the wagons and had to build bridges and basically do everything because men are lazy, let's face it. Um, the West, however, usually did not live up to the hype. There was threat of attack by hostile Indians, and basically our move west will destroy Native American society in the West as we began taking more and more Indian land. Another group that's going to go west are the Mormons. The video talks a good deal about that. They are not very popular in New York. At first, they went to Nauvoo, Missouri. Their internal dissension occur. John Smith ordered the printing press of someone who had attacked him seized. The governor of Illinois had Smith arrested and brought to a place called Carthage, Illinois. While he was there, a anti-Mormon crowd burst into a cell and shot him. He was succeeded in leadership by a man named Brigham Young. You probably heard of his university. They were told basically y'all had to leave, and that's when the Mormons go to Utah, which was a Mexican territory at the time. 16,000 went to the Salt Lake Valley. Food rationing was necessary the first year. And the church will be the one to distribute to those in need. In the Mormon faith, as you saw in the video, they were encouraged to have more than one wife. Young had 20. You bet you had to be able to provide for your children or for your families. Most Mormon men only had the one wife who, could blame them. That's actually a lot of work, isn't it? So the video does a good job about that. Now, what I want to get into is the video doesn't really talk about the Mexican War. So let's talk about Mexico. Now, what we got to remember is up until 1800, Spain controlled a large area of North America, what is today Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and parts of Nevada. They had 21 Catholic missions led by Franciscans, forcing many Native Americans to convert to Catholicism, also using them as forced labor. Mexico declared their independence from Spain in 1821, but they knew they needed to secure their northern boundary with the United States. The borderlands between the U.S. and what will become Texas was controlled by the Apache and the Comanche, but Mexico was concerned about the westward expansion of the United States. So to combat American expansion in 1824, the government of Mexico began to offer land grants to American settlers to Texas, introducing the ranchero system. Indians will no longer have a dependent status, though they will still perform most of the labor. So let me try to explain this because it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. Mexico was worried about Americans encroaching on Mexican territory, therefore Mexicans invited Americans to settle in Texas. That's brilliant right there. See how well that works. Now, if you were an American settler, you had to promise to learn Spanish and to convert to Catholicism. Most did not do that. By 1830, there were 7,000 American Texans, only 4,000 Hispanic Texans. This did lead to an economic boom in Texas, with $500,000 worth of goods going through the port of New Orleans. By 1830, excuse me, I've already said that. I apologize. Um, Many of the American settlers wanted to become part of the United States. They held a small uprising in 1826, which was easily crushed. At that point, the Mexicans banned American immigration. However, that did not stop Americans from coming in, and the ban is lifted in 1833. There are now 30,000 Americans in Texas. Once again, they would try to separate in 1834, trying to take advantage of the instability when General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna was taking over the country. Texans decided to revolt. We saw that in the video. Um, it becomes a very bloody war. The worst fighting was in 1836, probably at the Alamo, where David Crockett and Sam Bowie and others were killed in a hopeless battle. American Texans declared their independence in March of 1836, drafting a constitution based on the U.S. Constitution. Santa Anna did not like this. As we saw in the video, he comes in, he becomes overconfident, he divides his forces, and was captured by Sam Houston. I don't need to go into Sam Houston and all that because of the video. What most Texans, including Sam Houston, actually wanted was to be annexed by the United States. However, this was politically divisive because of, well, slavery. Now, Texas is kind of out there. 1834, they declare their independence. The U.S. wants them, sort of. They want the U.S., but it's a divisive topic. The debate will die down during the Panic of 1837, but will become a major issue again in 1844. John Tyler, who was president at the time, supported the annexation of Texas. James Polk, who ran against Henry Clay, made it part of his campaign. Tyler will use the joint resolution of Congress to finally annex Texas. Now, generally, John K. Polk gets the credit for annexing Texas. It's actually John Tyler. This was another example of where Congress kind of punted on an issue, like they often do. While no one liked John Tyler, everybody was looking toward the next president. They knew it would either be James K. Polk or Henry Clay. And Congress actually passed this resolution that said it would be up to the president to decide. Again, kind of cowardly. And what they actually meant was the next president, Clay or Polk. Well, it didn't say that, so Tyler is actually the one who annexes Texas. So yet another thing we can blame him for. Texas comes in as a slave state. Polk then becomes president. He then moves to acquire Oregon. You may have heard the slogan 54-40 or fight. He really wanted to go to war with the British over Oregon. He really wants to fight an expansionist war. We, however, agreed to a compromise with Canada, and we set our boundary at the 49th parallel, which it had been before, and we gained control of the Oregon Territory. So Polk didn't get his war, so he looks south. He looks at Mexico. The U.S. government began to negotiate with Mexico to buy California, but Polk made sure that those negotiations failed. They began arguing over Texas border. We began arguing with Mexico over what the Texas border was. Mexico said that it was Norris River, while we said it was the Rio Grande River. We were trying to take more territory than what we had. So Polk sends troops under the command of Zachary Taylor. Taylor's forces are attacked by a small group of Mexicans on April 25th, 1846. Polk said that this was an act of war. War was declared on May 13th. Now, normally in this country, we have a rally around the flag kind of situation where when we go to war, most people generally support it. However, whether or not you supported or didn't support this war was really based on sectional lines. This was seen as a way to expand territory for slavery. Northerners saw it as a manufactured war to get California and New Mexico. William Lloyd Garrison actually openly hoped for the defeat of the American army. That's how bad this was. Henry David Thoreau opposed the war. He advocated civil disobedience. This will become the first war fought mostly on foreign soil. Logistically, it was very difficult for us. But great generals like Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott came to the forefront. John C. Fremont got California to rebel against Mexico. You see what happened there in the video. Scott will capture Mexico City on May 1st, 1847. The war ends with what's called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and it settled forever the border with Texas. We gained California, New Mexico, Arizona, new parts of Texas, Utah, Colorado, and Nevada. All told, we took 55% of Mexican territory. Over half of their country we just took. This will become, for better or for worse, the first conflict covered by professional journalists. There will become a major, in fact, this is where we first see embedded soldiers. This is actually something that appeared in a newspaper. This is the death of Henry Clay Jr. This was drawn by artists, and a story was written, and this ended up in newspapers. So for better or for worse, the press will be embedded in our war efforts. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes you get Colorado, Rivera giving away troop positions. So now there's a major debate over what to do with the new territory. David Wilmot from Pennsylvania offered what was called the Wilmot Proviso, which would have banned slavery in the new territories. Obviously, Southerners opposed this. Polk wanted to use the Missouri Compromise line. After all, it was there. That's why it happened. That's why it was there. Senator Lewis Cass of Michigan, Democrat, because he wanted to run for president, proposed what was called popular sovereignty, where each territory could make its own decision. Now the debate was over when that decision would be made. Would it be made early on, or would it be made at the time of the writing of the state constitution? This may not seem like a big deal, but a lot of pressure can be given at certain times. John C. Calhoun, our favorite Southerner from South Carolina, said that it should happen at the writing of the Constitution. Others disagreed. This will play a major role in the election of 1848. The Democrats nominated Lewis Cass. The Whigs chose Zachary Taylor over Henry Clay. There will be a third party, Free Soil Party, basically anti-slavery Democrats and some former Whigs. They will nominate our good friend Martin Van Buren, a.k.a. Martin Van Ruin. Martin Van Buren was obviously a guy who felt like he was entitled to the presidency. Taylor wins the election fairly handily. He is, after all, a war hero. Gold will be discovered in California in the summer of in 1849, which will lead to the Great Gold Rush. That's where you get the term 49ers. This led to an increased numbers of people in California and Nevada. They found more mines in Nevada as well. Taylor wanted these states to decide the slavery issue on their own. California decided to prohibit slavery. New Mexico also wanted to do the same. That led to conflict and what will be the Compromise of 1850. So here was the problem. They were all for popular sovereignty in the South until you had California, which is a huge state, deciding to be anti-slavery. And they're, okay, fine. That's fine. And then when New Mexico comes along and says, we don't want slavery either, they're like, oh, hell no, you got to have slavery to keep it even. Because they're very afraid of the unbalance. And this will lead to the crisis in 1850 we've talked a little bit about before. Henry Clay is going to have to come back in and sort this out. So there's a conflict over these new states. So what Clay wanted to do was to admit California as a free state and would organize New Mexico into two territories that would decide on slavery. He also wanted to settle the border dispute between Texas and New Mexico. He wanted to ban the slave trade in Washington, D.C. He wanted a stronger federal fugitive slave act. Calhoun will write a speech denouncing the North. He couldn't give it himself. He had to get someone else to do it. He was sick. He's basically, you've seen that video where that guy, when Britney Spears went nuts and that blonde dude was like, leave Britney alone. Well, that's what you got with John C. Calhoun. John C. Calhoun is like, leave the South alone. Because, he wants to protect his peculiar institution. Slavery, he sees it as a positive good. Daniel Webster of Massachusetts gives what's called the 7th of March Address, which was a plea for moderation. William Seward gave an anti-slavery speech. It looked like the time for compromise may have been done. The debate went on for months. We talked about Henry Clay. He had come in, but he was ill. He couldn't be there the whole time. He had to count on Stephen A. Douglas. Now, what Clay wanted was to craft one big compromise omnibus bill with all of those things that we talked about. The idea was there would be things that the North loved and things that the South hated, things that the South loved and that the North hated, but it would look like a sign of unity when everyone voted for all of these. Well, as I said, Clay couldn't get the job done to make one bill. So, what Stephen Douglas does is he's able to make it 5 separate bills. This is not what Clay wanted, but Clay comes in, he gives his impassioned speeches, it's going to pass. Now, these 5 bills will do 6 different things, and you're going to want to remember this if you write about this in an essay or something. Number 1, California comes in as a free state. Number 2, Utah and New Mexico will use popular sovereignty to decide whether they have slavery. Number 3, and actually number 4 are in one bill, but number 3 says Texas will relinquish claims to territories in New Mexico, and in exchange for that, number 4, the U.S. would assume $10 million worth of Texas debt. Number 5, we banned the slave trade in Washington, D.C. 6, we passed a new Fugitive Slave Act to try to compel northern governors to actually send fugitive slaves back. Now, what we're going to see is that didn't actually work. That's what the Compromise of 1850 was. And what it will do is it will put off the Civil War, for better or for worse, for a period of 10 years. So, westward expansion does not end up being that magic bullet to bring back America, bring America together. There were too many differences. So, that's where we're going to end today. What we will talk about next time is the lead up to the Civil War itself, and as I said, following week, Reconstruction, brief lecture on that, but mostly next week, the final week of our class will be getting all your assignments done. So I look forward to hearing your comments about the West. I hope that you enjoy the Ken Burns documentary. I think it's really an excellent work. In fact, if you're really interested in the West, if you're interested in the gold rush itself, the entire series is worth it. In fact, in the supplemental videos, I will post links to some of those other videos. So until next time, I hope everyone's staying safe, and I hope everyone is well, and I will talk to you soon. I look forward to reading your discussion board posts. Like I said before, it is kind of one of the highlights of my day. For those who are participating, I very much appreciate it. If you haven't really participated yet, please do. It's kind of how I know that you're with us and lets me know that you're okay. Until next time, have a good day.